Hello everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive File. We have pulled a really dense stack of sources today.
We have.
And it all focuses on this single harrowing day in the Vietnam War, and really a profound moral choice made by one man that I think few people truly know the details of.
Today we're talking about one of the most incredible, untold stories of the Vietnam War. It forces us to ask, what happens when doing the right thing makes you a traitor?
That moral paradox is exactly our mission here. We are diving into the My Lai Massacre, March 16th, 1968.
Yeah.
But our focus is entirely on the moral stand taken by one pilot, Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr. and his crew.
They were the only ones who did anything, the only ones who stopped the carnage.
So tell us about Thompson. Who was this guy?
So Thompson was a helicopter pilot. He was flying an OH-23G Raven.
Okay.
And to really get the bravery here, you have to understand the aircraft. Right. It was tiny, almost completely unarmored.
Right.
It was so fragile they actually nicknamed it the Bubble.
The Bubble, like a glass bubble.
Exactly. It was essentially a flying glass dome. His call sign was Warlord Alpha Lead, and he had two very young men with him.
Just two?
Yeah. His gunner, Specialist Lawrence Colburn, who's only 18 years old.
18, wow.
And his crew chief, Specialist Glenn Andreotta.
And there's a detail about Thompson's background, his civilian life, that seems so critical here.
It's everything. He wasn't some, hardened career military guy. He was a trained funeral director from Georgia.
A funeral director?
Yes. And that is so key to understanding his reaction that morning. He was trained professionally to treat the dead with dignity and respect, even enemy dead.
And what he saw over My Lai was the absolute opposite of that.
The absolute inverse of every single principle he held.
So let's look at the ground troops. What was happening with them? Charlie Company.
Charlie Company was a powder keg. I mean, this is right after the Tet Offensive.
Okay, so tensions are high.
Extremely high. They were operating in this atmosphere of intense paranoia. For weeks, they'd been losing men to mines to snipers.
But they never actually saw the enemy.
They never engaged them face to face. So you had this constant unseen threat that had built up this need for retribution against a faceless enemy.
It sounds like operational desperation just morphed into this indiscriminate rage.
It did. And the whole operation was, frankly, set up to fail morally. At 7:30 that morning, the village of My Lai 4 gets hit with a punishing artillery barrage.
From what, howitzers?
Yeah, 105mm howitzers. The idea was to clear the landing zone, the LZ, of any Viet Cong resistance.
But our sources are pretty clear that the artillery wasn't hitting resistance fighters.
No. And this is where the profound irony of the day really begins.
What do you mean?
The saturation fire, it didn't kill enemy soldiers. All it did was drive the civilian population, the elderly, women, children, deep into their underground family bunkers.
So it concentrated the victims?
It concentrated them. It made the ground troops' job, if you can even call it that, terrifyingly easy.
So when the infantry finally lands, around 7.47?
The LZ was cold.
Cold, meaning no return fire.
No return fire. No enemy resistance at all. Which immediately contradicted their briefing. They were told this was a hot operation against the dug-in VC battalion.
So the whole premise of the mission just falls apart on contact.
Instantly.
Yeah.
They meet unarmed, terrified people instead of soldiers.
And Thompson is seeing all this from the air?
Yeah, he's flying low in his bubble, maybe 50, 100 feet up. At first, he assumes the troops are finally engaging the enemy. He sees one military-aged male with a weapon runoff.
But that's it.
That's it. Then he starts orbiting, and the discrepancy becomes lethal.
Okay, let's slow down here, because this moment of realization for Thompson is it's pivotal.
It is. He starts spotting clusters of wounded civilians. Unarmed.
Men, children.
All of them. And he does what he's trained to do. He deploys these bright green smoke canisters right next to them.
And green smoke is the universal signal, right?
It's the internationally recognized signal in Vietnam for friendlies needing immediate medical evacuation.
So he's basically broadcasting to the troops on the ground. Stop, these are non-combatants, help them.
Exactly. But then this horrifying cognitive dissonance sets in.
What happens?
He circles around, comes back maybe a minute or two later, and the civilians he had just marked with green smoke, they're now dead.
Oh my God.
The ground troops were using his medical markers, not for rescue, but as target designators.
The compact between air and ground, that trust, it's just completely broken.
Fundamentally broken. At the same time, the cover-up is already starting on the radio.
How so?
Thompson is monitoring the radio net. He's hearing reports from the ground commander, Captain Ernest Medina.
Charlie 6.
Right, reporting these high VC body counts. But Thompson has this panoramic, irrefutable view. He sees dead peasants, mutilated bodies, slaughtered livestock.
Nothing matching the official report.
Nothing. The gap between the military reality being broadcast and the visceral truth he was witnessing was just unbearable.
And that all culminates at the drainage ditch.
Around 9 a.m., Lieutenant William Calley's platoon had herded this huge group of villagers. Sources estimate anywhere from 70 to 170 people, mostly women, infants, and old men, into this deep irrigation ditch.
And Thompson sees this.
He sees it, and he makes the insane decision to land his fragile helicopter right there.
With the rotor still spinning.
Rotor spinning. He is absolutely furious. He storms over to Calley to confront him.
And what does Calley say?
His defense was just immediate and cold. He says, "This is my business."
This is my business.
Yeah, and that he was just following orders. Thompson is standing there face to face with him and says, "But these are human beings, unarmed civilians, sir."
And Calley just tells him to get back in the air.
Basically, mind his own business. So Thompson takes off, shaking with rage, planning to report him. But as the helicopter gains altitude,
What happens?
his crew chief, Glenn Andreotta, shouts over the intercom.
What does he say?
He screams, "My God, he's firing into the ditch. They're all dead."
So Calley waited for him to leave.
The moment he was airborne, Calley and others opened fire, massacring everyone in that ditch.
That was the point of no return.
It was. But Thompson didn't retreat. He spots a second group, maybe 10 or 12 civilians, hiding in a bunker.
And there are American troops moving toward them.
Yeah, elements of the second platoon are closing in on them. And so he makes this immediate, decisive, and frankly, potentially suicidal choice.
He lands the helicopter again.
He lands his tiny, vulnerable OH-23 between the advancing American soldiers and the bunker.
A tactical blockade against his own side.
He stopped being an air asset. He became a moral check against his own infantry. It just begs the question, what do you do when the threat to human life is wearing your uniform?
And he answered it. He gave what has to be the most unprecedented order of the entire war.
He turns to his crew, to Colburn and Andreotta, and he gives this famous, you could say, treasonous order.
Tell us exactly what he said.
He said, "I'm going to go over and get them out. If they, meaning the Americans, open up on me, you open up on them."
So he ordered his crew to fire on American troops if necessary.
There, yes. And his 18-year-old gunner, Lawrence Colburn, just says, "You got it, boss."
Wow. So what happened with the troops at the bunker?
Thompson gets out, faces their leader, a Lieutenant Brooks. And Brooks's response is just brutally cynical. He says, "We can help you get him out of that bunker with a hand grenade."
Unbelievable.
And Thompson doesn't even flinch. He just replies, "I think I could do better than that."
And he did. He got them out.
He coaxed those terrified people out.
Yeah.
But he couldn't fly all of them. So he gets on the radio to the attack gunships, the Sharks.
Who are not supposed to be doing transport.
Never. They're for fire support.
Yeah.
But he convinces them, just on the sheer gravity of the situation, to land and evacuate those civilians.
So he saved them.
He saved them, but he still wasn't done. He flies back to the ditch.
The mass grave.
Yeah. And Andreotta, the crew chief, he spots movement down in the mud and the blood.
Someone was still alive.
He climbs down into that carnage and pulls out a small boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, a kid named Doba.
And they got him out.
Flew him directly to the hospital in Kwangai. Saved his life.
So after all this, Thompson flies back to base.
He returns, shaking with fury, reports the whole thing to his commander, and basically threatens to quit. He says, "You can take these wings right now because they're only sewn on with thread."
And his report actually worked.
It did. He went up the chain, and a ceasefire was ordered. It canceled further operations at My Lai 5 and 6. Historians estimate he saved hundreds more lives by doing that. He stopped the massacre.
And before we see how the army punished him for this, stories like this are often suppressed or demonetized. If you want us to keep digging up the truth, please subscribe and like the channel right now. It helps us fight the algorithm.
Absolutely. Hit that button.
Now, let's talk about the betrayal.
Yeah, the irony is just, it's immediate. Thompson wasn't celebrated for saving lives. He was vilified.
By who?
By many within the military. When he came home, he was labeled a rat, a traitor. People saw the exposure of My Lai not as exposing a war crime, but as an attack on the military itself.
So he was isolated.
Completely, especially in the officers' club.
Right.
But it went way beyond just social ostracization. He faced this severe, targeted psychological warfare back home.
You mean threats?
Anonymous, chilling death threats against him and his family. And the intimidation tactics were grotesque.
How so?
There are multiple accounts of mutilated animals being left on his porch.
Oh, come on.
Dead dogs. Left on his front porch as a kind of mafia-style warning. The war and the moral stain of My Lai had literally followed him home.
And at the same time, the army is trying to cover its tracks.
They try to buy his silence with a lie. They award him the Distinguished Flying Cross, the DFC.
Which is a huge honor.
A huge honor. But the citation was completely fabricated.
What did it say?
The official citation claimed he acted under intense crossfire.
But there was no crossfire. The LZ was cold.
Exactly. By inserting that lie, the Army was trying to rewrite history, to turn an atrocity into a story about combat heroism to protect the institution.
And Thompson, what did he do?
He refused to participate. He rejected the medal. He would not accept an honor based on a lie that distorted what really happened.
And this betrayal went all the way to Washington.
It went to the top. One of the most powerful men in Congress, L. Mendel Rivers, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee.
Okay.
He publicly called Thompson a traitor and actively tried to get him court-martialed for threatening to fire on American troops.
So the very act of upholding the military's moral code was being treated as sedition by Congress.
It's unbelievable. And the irony of the justice, if you can call it that, is just damning.
You mean with Lieutenant Calley?
Right. Calley, who directed the massacre, was the only person convicted. He served just 3 years of house arrest.
3 years? At home?
Meanwhile, Thompson, the man who saved lives and stopped the slaughter, served 30 years in social exile with constant harassment and isolation.
And you just have to look at the casualty numbers for that day.
It tells you everything. The only American casualty at My Lai was a single soldier who accidentally shot himself in the foot.
One self-inflicted wound versus over 500 dead civilians. It completely demolishes any argument that this was a battle.
It does. And it took 3 decades for the Army to finally correct the record.
1998, right.
1998. Thompson and Colburn, along with Andreotta, who was awarded it posthumously, were finally given the Soldier's Medal.
And the specific significance of this medal is crucial.
It is.
Yeah.
This is not a medal for combat valor. The Soldier's Medal is awarded for heroism not involving conflict with the enemy.
Not involving conflict with the enemy.
By granting the medal with that specific citation, the U.S. Army officially admitted, without ever having to say the words,
that the threat Thompson faced that day came from within its own ranks.
Exactly. The only way to get that medal was to confirm that the enemy wasn't the Viet Cong, it was the American soldiers on the ground below him.
His story really is the ultimate definition of moral courage, choosing between orders and basic human dignity.
It is. And we could probably end the analysis with his own reflection on it. He said, "I saved the people because I wasn't taught to murder and kill. I apologize for the ones who did, and I just wish we could have helped more people that day."
Such simple words, but they say everything. The funeral director from Georgia taught the U.S. Army a lesson in dignity that day.
But there is a final provocative thought for you to consider, and it ties back to the crew.
Okay.
What about Glenn Andreotta, the crew chief who actually climbed into that ditch and pulled out the little boy, Dubah?
What happened to him?
Andreotta was killed in action just 3 weeks later, April 8th, 1968.
So he never lived to see any of this.
He never saw his actions recognized. He never saw his reputation restored. Thompson and Colburn carried that burden for 30 years, knowing the man who made that ultimate physical sacrifice was never honored in his lifetime.
A heavy thought to leave on.
It is, but it's an essential part of this hidden history.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more hidden history. We'll see you in the next deep dive.